So the 10th structure stage is violet, and it has to do with the subtle state as a realized structure, as something that can be accessed regularly in conscious awareness. The most direct source of the top 4 altitudes you could probably say is Sri Aurobindo or Teilhard de Chardin. Sri Aurobindo and his integral yoga suggest the existence of these structures of consciousness, which Wilber then uses the terminology, but and establishes links between that and a lot of other sources. To make it as simple as possible, just imagine that there's 3 great states: waking, dreaming, and deep sleep. And we know what these are. We're all aware of these. You might even know the associated brainwave states. So these are states that everyone goes through every day, pretty much. Through meditation, we learn to not just be at our waking state and conscious, we learn to enter the dreaming state consciously. So part of the meditation practice will inevitably allow you to access your dreams, to be aware of them, have perfect dream recall, lucid dreams. This will occur naturally as you meditate. So not only accessing a dreaming state from the alert state, but also when you dream naturally, the alert state will come in. It's both ways. It's both from the dream state to consciousness and from consciousness to the dream state. It's a two-way street. And at that point, you could say that you are at a violet level, a subtle level, a level where that subtle state is a constant ability acquisition or something you can regularly access. That would be what we would call violet in this model. As you know, you can have intense nightmares, you can have intense dreams, powerful dreams, profound dreams. So just imagine amping that up all the way. That would be what I would consider a sort of vision or a more subtle, an experience of the deepest parts of the mind. Okay, and then long ways down from there, a long time after that, you then may be able to take your consciousness not only from waking and into dream, but all the way into deep dreamless sleep, so that you're conscious all the time, 24 hours a day. You've learned to continue the present self all the time. And this has the implication in a lot of traditions and logically that you will carry your consciousness into death when you die. If there is some agency in the process that ensues, you will have that awareness and that center as it occurs. Meditation in a very simple and a very almost commercial way, you can just think of it as you're right now capable of being awake only in a waking state, conscious and awake, alert, only in your waking state. And then at night you go to sleep, you dream, you go to sleep, you sleep, body recharges. That's your system. As you meditate over the course of maybe 3 to 5 years, you should gain constant consciousness through the dream so that you're still there, you're still present, you're still conscious, and you'll remember it all. Your mind won't filter it out and consider yourself a different thing from that. You will identify with the entire subtle self. And then a long time later, the two ways of approaching it are at the end of the dream sequence, you may just continue to be there and roll out into the abyss or whatever occurs. Still conscious, no body awareness, no mind awareness. Deep dreaming sleep, delta brainwave only. The other part of it is that comes out into your waking state so that delta frequency is still powerful and present. That I amness, that sense of infinite being is coming out while you're awake. So it's both ways. It's consciousness into waking, dreaming, deep sleep, but then it's the deep sleep body coming out in waking consciousness. The dreaming body coming out in waking consciousness. This is why the psychic or the indigo is often thought of as bands, layers, a spectrum that dissipates. Because these layers, the divisions between these great states are breaking down. And the self is not considered a slave to the waking state, but is rather the consciousness which inhabits all 3 of those states, all 3 of those bodies. That is essentially the entire course of the 4 top stages of the model. It is an oversimplification by necessity, but we can essentially say that in the indigo altitude, you're dealing with the psychic, which is the relationship between the conscious mind and states of consciousness and the ability to access them. So through a meditation practice, through some sort of shamanism, possibly some inebriating substances even, a person is experimenting with their state of consciousness and trying to figure out how to bring it to a more true, honest, fulfilling, blissful, joyful state of consciousness. That practice will inevitably work out for the aspiring mystic, and they may be satisfied there, or they may continue. To continue is to bring that state deeper and deeper, bring awareness deeper and deeper, and this will require a more traditional meditation, a great deal more discipline, because certain things need to be purified. It's a very refined state, and it requires a refined focus. It requires a lot of work. It's largely a process of purification and meditation and an emotional release. It requires kind of a clean emotionality, our conscience. It's hard to kind of explain this, but there's just something to the need to be present and courageous in one's actions. In this realm, we're sort of a warrior. And in Indigo, we're in the realm of tricksters. It's very important to realize that your first experiences with these altered states, you will be encountering tricksters who are deliberately trying to mess up your mind about what all this stuff is. Your first impulse, if you possibly can, is try to not take any of this stuff seriously. Allow yourself to be killed. Allow things to attack you and harm you. There's no reality to any of this stuff. You're not being cursed. These are tricksters. This is in your own mind. There's aspects of yourself that are trying to keep you afraid of going here. They're nightmaring you away from your own truth. But you can get through it. Everyone in the world can get through this. And they can go deeper, and they can get into that violet state, which is much more blissful and much more real and honest. And this is where the real truths start to become revealed. Obviously, a lot of people are going to be skeptical about this entire range of topics that meditation can lead to anything besides infantile regression and absorption. That's a point to be made. And then that there's successive levels of it, that's a point to be made, because a lot of people will just disagree with that. There's going to be a lot of bones of contention among people who agree with that already, also picking apart the magical, the mythical, the rational, merely rational, and especially also the sensitive. All of the first tier perspectives need to be seen for what they are, and it needs to be understood that here we're coming from second tier, and we're only talking about states of consciousness and how to internalize those as structures. So we're not talking about ideology and belief anymore from here. Here's how it works for the rationalist, the skeptic. Yeah, I owe it to you to explain this. So how do we find out that germs cause diseases? The germ theory, pathogen theory is look into a microscope. We have to build a microscope. You have to conceptualize a microscope. You build a microscope. Then you can look into the microscope, and nobody can doubt anymore that this is a true reality. You could have done it with theory prior to that, but if you really want to make a believer, you have to experience it. If you want to explain a state, you have to experience that state, especially if it's a state that isn't commonly understood. If you want to know what it's like to smoke marijuana, your best bet is to smoke marijuana. You could have me explain to you what smoking marijuana is like. You could remember what it was like to smoke marijuana, but those are not the same thing as knowing what it's like to be on marijuana right now. So this is how states of consciousness work. To know a state, you're in the state right now. Otherwise, you're talking about the state, you're remembering the state, but what state are you in now? That's going to play a large role. So in general, we're in this conscious, waking, dilated, personal, interpersonal state. And so everything is filtered through that. And so what I convey to you about these states is going to be processed and filtered through that, and that is really important to understand. If you want to be convinced of the reality of psychic and subtle and causal and non-dual states, you'll have to experience each of them. The reason that I'm convinced of the existence of these states is I've experienced some of them. And so I find it compelling going from not believing in them and then trying out this experiment and experiencing some of them. I now believe that at least those ones are certainly true. The higher ones would follow they are true as well. If you want to be able to say with authority whether meditative states exist or can be accessed or are anything or mean anything, yes, you can describe them and describe brain states and just remember them and have people talk about them. These are all valid data, but you can't discount the people who are actually experiencing those states, explaining what they are like from their own perspective on their own terms.